Your candidate has accepted an offer. He has given notice. I would like to tell you that you're home, but experienced recruiters know that a deal can get all the way to the finish line and then be blown apart by unexpected circumstances. I call these things deal breakers. And right now we're going to discuss deal breakers. I will tell you what the deal breaker is, and I want you to tell me, number one, how do we prevent it from happening? And number two, if we've been unable to prevent it from happening, how do we handle it if it happens? For instance, deal breaker. Candidate gets an offer, accepts, goes in to resign, and gets a counteroffer. Candidate gets a counteroffer. That is a deal breaker. How do we prevent it from being a deal breaker? How do we prevent it from being a deal breaker?
Obviously, you've prepped him for the counteroffer. You've told him what to expect, the reasons and their motivations for offering a counteroffer. You've told him to expect that and how to deal with it.
Thank you. The answer is preparation. We prevent it from being a deal breaker with thorough and constant preparation by discussing the counteroffer with him several times, by educating him about the resignation drill, by dictating letters of resignation, by orchestrating the resignation interview. That's how we prevent it from being a deal breaker. But let's say that we've been unable to prevent it, we haven't prepared him, this deal has happened fast, or we were careless for whatever reason, we didn't prepare him. He has gotten an offer, he has gone in to give notice, has gotten a counteroffer, and is thinking about it. And believe me, in the absence of preparation, that counteroffer is powerful medicine. He's thinking about it. How do we handle it now? What do we do? He's got a counteroffer, he's thinking about it.
If we haven't done the preparation, we got a lot of hard work ahead of us. Hopefully, we'll have a backlog of information on people who have accepted counteroffers and how within 6 months, 9 out of 10 of them were back out in the streets anyway. And we can point that out to them and perhaps get them in contact with some of those people.
The way to do it first is to go back to your first 5 minutes of conversation with this candidate. Remember, you asked him, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being most anxious to make a change, how anxious are you? And he gave you an answer. Well, I want that answer to be convincing enough so that you can use it to convince him not to take a counteroffer. That's how strong his reasons for making a change have to be. Yes, we're going to use the statistical reasons. Yes, we're going to put him in touch with other people who have accepted counteroffers. But the way to really turn it around is to be able to use his own information back on him. Deal breaker. Candidate blows the final interview. He's been told it's a rubber stamp, a courtesy interview, a formality, and he lets his guard down. Let me flesh this one out for you a little bit. You're dealing with district. District says your candidate has to come in and interview with group, district, and division. District says he has a hiring authority. So your candidate goes in, interviews with group, district, and division. District says, we love him. We're going to make him an offer. Offer day comes and goes. No offer. A week later, you're getting impatient. You call district. You say, where's the offer? And district says, oh, don't worry. He's our guy. We're going to make him an offer. By the way, there's a guy coming to town, a VP. We like him to shake everybody's hand before they come on board. Courtesy interview, formality, rubber stamp. So you go to your candidate and you say, you've got the job. They're going to make you the offer, but there's a guy they want you to meet. They just want you to shake his hand. So your candidate, who has gone to bed early before every interview, who's done his homework, who's been in there on his best behavior, working hard to get that job, goes into the interview with the VP, the rubber stamp, glib, hands in his pockets, telling jokes. He's talking stuff with the VP. He's part of the team now. And the VP tells jokes with him, slaps him on the back, says, nice to meet you, pal. Calls up district and says, pass, and district calls you and says, pass. What happened here? We had a deal. What's the problem? What didn't we do?
First of all, it's been my experience, you've never, ever, there's never, ever a rubber stamp interview. It's preparation again.
There is no such thing as a courtesy interview. Every interview that's going to take place is more important than the one that took place last time. Every person he's going to meet is a quicker decision maker than the one he made last time. And especially if an interview pops up at the last minute that hasn't been dictated on the initial rotation, all my flags go up. I want to know who's it with, why is it happening, what are they going to talk about, so that I can prepare, thank you, Mark, that is the word, prepare my candidate to go in and what? Win. That's right, to go in and win. But we're recruiters, we're optimists. We only like to get good news, we only like to give good news. And District told us that he had the job and that this was a courtesy interview. So we said, you got the job. We wired him for failure, and he went right in there and failed. VP called District and said pass. District called us and said pass. How can we put this one back together, and this one can be put back together? Let me see your hand when you've got it. Paul, go ahead.
Well, I had a situation happen like that 2 months ago. And what I did was I called District, and I told him it was my fault, that I didn't prepare him because I thought we had the deal all done.
Well, Paul, that's very good. It was good thinking on your part, creative thinking, except that usually District won't run your errands in this case, because District already has egg on his face with you and egg on his face with the VP. There's another more certain way to take care of this deal breaker. Anybody have an idea? Have the candidate call the VP. Candidate calls VP and says, I blew that interview. I was in there acting like I had the job, and I didn't have the job. I would like the opportunity to interview with you once more to make a different impression. It's a personal appeal. It is an irresistible appeal. It almost always gets the interview back, and if you do your jobs right and prepare this candidate this time, most likely he will get the job. Deal breaker. Company finds a skeleton in the candidate's closet. He was fired, or he had a job for 3 months that he didn't tell the company about. Or he says he has a degree on his resume, but he's actually 2 hours short. How do we prevent that deal breaker from happening?
By doing a thorough check of references with all past employers, confirming employment dates, checking and verifying degree.
Well, yes, we can do that, but we want to be able to find this information out before we do the reference checks. Hopefully we'll have it the very first time we talk to the candidate. Now, how do we get it? Ask them for it. Everybody that you're going to send out on an interview, ask them, is everything on this resume correct? Are you leaving anything out? Are there any skeletons, any surprises, anything that we would find out about later? The way to prevent it from being a deal breaker is to ask that question right out front and have the candidate tell you about it, so that if the candidate now says, well, I had a job for 3 months 5 years ago, I didn't want to put it on my resume because I don't want to look like a job hopper, then we would go to the company and say, guy had a job 5 years ago for 3 months. Is the fact that he had a job 5 years ago for 3 months a deal breaker? What would the deal breaker be? The fact that he left it off his resume. But let's say we said, everything on here true and correct? He says yes. Leaving anything out? Nope. Any skeletons? Nope. And we send him out to the interview. And after he leaves the interview, one of the executives walks up to the decision maker and says, I know that guy. Let me take a look at the resume. Oh, yeah, him. He was at my company 5 years ago. Was only there for 3 months. Didn't really get to know him. And sure enough, it's not there. A lie has been exposed. What do we do now? What do we do now? Some recruiters will say, well, I'll call up the company and tell them it's my fault. You want to do that? Do you want to do that? Absolutely not. Here's what you want to do. You want to put some distance between yourself and this candidate as quickly as possible. The candidate is lying. Yes, you want the candidate and the company to work it out together. At the candidate's initiative, you want him to come clean. But let me tell you, there is no good time to correct a lie after it's been exposed. The good time to correct it is before it's been exposed. After it's been exposed, all you can do is acknowledge it. Nobody wants to hire a liar. Honesty is right at the top of what a company considers to be important these days. Deal breaker. Wife has reservations about husband changing jobs. Or husband has reservations about wife changing jobs in office support. And very often the husband objection is more irrational than the wife objection. How do we handle spousal objections? How do we prevent them from becoming a deal breaker? Rose.
Well, before I'd ever have the candidate out on interview, I'd be sure to have a thorough conversation with the spouse. Find out what the spouse's employment, how important that spouse's employment is to a change being made, whether or not they really would make a change if the spouse had an offer to move elsewhere.
Well, you know, Rose, we would like to be able to talk to the spouses ahead of time every time we send somebody out, but I don't think it's practical. Recruiters who have been burned by this particular deal breaker before usually add a step called spousal debrief to the 30 steps. It takes place right after first interview debrief. And it works like this. Recruiter calls candidate's home when he knows candidate isn't going to be there. Candidate's wife or husband answers the phone, says, hi. Recruiter asks for the candidate. Candidate's spouse says, candidate's not here. Recruiter says, hi, my name's Tony Byrne. I'm the recruiter who has Charlie out on that interview at Northrop. What do you think about that? And engages the spouse in a conversation, finds out if the spouse has any questions. You know, very often the spouse will have a question that she hasn't articulated to the husband. Maybe she's concerned about vacations or schooling or housing or any one of a number of things. Well, draw those things out so that you can do some homework for the spouse, and the next time you talk to Charlie, say, I had a conversation with your wife, you weren't home, I asked her, she had a couple of questions. And here's some work that I've done for her, some research. You might want to give her these answers. And then from now on, every time you talk to Charlie, you make sure that you're asking about his wife and keeping his wife up to date. Now, we are talking about the spouse in the deal breaker section, but I want to tell you something. If you bring the spouse on board, if you handle the spouse's problems, if you make the spouse an enthusiastic supporter, you have a deal maker in the house. It is a very good thing to have. So this can be a deal maker as much as it can be a deal breaker. Deal breaker. Candidate gets a review 2 days before the offer, paying them approximately as much as the offer. How do we prevent that from being a deal breaker?
When we originally talked to the candidate, we find out right away when his next raise is going to be. So when we present the candidate to the employer, we present him not as being on a base of 40, but as being at 44 income within another month.
Exactly, Mark, so that we can present him as someone who will be earning 44 at the time of the offer. It'll make a difference in the amount of the offer. Instead of coming in with 44, they might come in with 46. And let's say that you haven't prevented it. How do we handle it when it happens? Offer is coming in at 44 in 2 days. He does get a review to 44 today. How do we handle it? Well, we go to the company and say, look, I blew it. I presented him at 40. Actually, he's earning 44 effective day after tomorrow. You should come up with more money. Now, I would always tell a company when this happened at my firm that I will bill you on the amount of the original offer so you know that there is no vested interest in getting the offer up. But make sure that you get the candidate more money. Final deal breaker. This is the mama of deal breakers. This one's been a tough one. You've been working on it for 6 weeks. Candidate was kind of a tough sell at first, but he came along. And then the company didn't want to come up with his money because he was very expensive. But they said, no, we're going to pay his freight. We want this guy. Offer's coming in 2 days. You get a call from the company today. You figure they're coming in early with the offer. Hiring freeze. You ever heard those 2 words before? How do you prevent that deal breaker from happening? It's a trick. You can't prevent it from happening. Usually your decision maker is just as shocked as you are. See, that decision comes from afar. But there are 2 ways to handle it. First thing you have to understand is that hiring freeze is just a decision. It's a memo somebody wrote. And exceptions are made to those decisions, to hiring freezes, all the time. But you can't get the exception made because it happened at corporate someplace. It happened beyond your contact. Your decision maker contact has to get the exception made, and he uses up political capital doing that. So you have to convince him that he's obligated to do it. You have to tell him, look, Charlie is emotionally committed to your company. He's planning to start at your company in 2 weeks. His family has told their friends and neighbors that they're going to work for your company. And it's only a matter of time before the references get back to his current company. Grandfather the offer. Backdate the offer. Bring him in under the freeze. It's done all the time, but your decision maker has to get that done for you. Get them brought in now as a clean, permanent hire. That's the best way to handle it. Now, there's another way to handle it. Have him brought on board as a consultant for the duration of the freeze, with your fee paid pro rata on a monthly basis, with the understanding that when the freeze expires, he'll be brought on board full-time, and your full fee will be paid minus whatever you've been paid already. Now, there are two reasons I don't like that. Number one, you're asking a candidate to go from what is, in essence, a permanent situation to a temporary situation. Number two, you run the risk of experiencing what's called a temp-to-perm conversion at the time of permanent hire, which will leave you with a much reduced fee or perhaps no fee at all at that time. The best way to do it is to have him brought on board as a permanent hire, have the offer backdated, or just have an exception made. Now, if you can get through this thicket and get your candidate all the way to the company, then congratulations. You made a placement. All right. That's great. Yes.